Okay, so I think we're going to start. So our first presenter is Dr. Joan K. She is a co-author of a theory about the gap between expert and novice thinking. Decoding the disciplines is a pedagogical theory used to analyze common students' mistakes or bottlenecks. Markers for the tactic knowledge of disciplinary experts. Students operating with a decoded class are not only more likely to learn to get past the specific bottlenecks, but also gain an understanding of the underlying epistemology of the discipline. Dr. Middendorf serves as lead consultant at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and adjunct professor in educational leadership at Indiana University, Bloomington. She and her research team received the 2008 Robert Mangus Outstanding Research Award. Is that right? Yeah. Award and the 2009 Magna Publication Outstanding Scholarly Work on Teaching and Learning Award. When she is not working on her urban farmstead, Dr. Middendorf likes to kite, hike, and practice Tai Chi. So here's Dr. Middendorf.
Thank you so much for inviting me to share my research with you this afternoon. I'm going to talk about, I went to IU, I got my PhD in the IST department here, and I always worked at the teaching center from day one. Luckily for me, I want to give credit to Ray Smith, who's in your department. Ray Smith was my boss for many years, and he gave me and David Pace some funding and free rein to lead faculty workshops for many summers. I think we did it for 11 years. And in those workshops, we didn't mean to come up with a theory of pedagogy, but that is what happened to us because we found a gap, that there wasn't a good theory of helping college teachers help their students learn. And so Coding the Disciplines is a theory about the gap between expert thinking and novice thinking that helps us help learners. So for learners, what experts do can often look like something like this, which is very scary for learners. They don't know how to do that. And what they would really like is for learning to be more like this, where somebody can catch them or hold them or show them the way to make learning easier. And why is there this gap between experts and novices? What we know about experts is that they can chunk and process information a lot faster and in larger units than novices. So they can do a whole lot of things all at once. And it just kind of goes by the learner, and the learner will be like, what happened? What did they just do? What that looks like in the classroom is that repeatedly there are things students can't do very well. And I think in the past we would hear people complain a lot about their students. They can't do such and such. But we don't like to call those things students can't do bottlenecks, and our theory tells us that. We're just going to work on a couple parts of this today. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to look for the place where students get stuck. Instead of that being something you can complain about, it can be something you can actually teach better too. So stuck places we call bottlenecks. We're going to work on that today, and we're going to work on figuring out what does the expert do all of a sudden that's making the students get stuck. How do we unpack or decode that stuck place of the expert? And I'm going to use examples about teaching reading and teaching writing, because I hope that that will be relevant to you because you're in this department. Okay? So we're going to focus now on step one, the bottleneck. These are the places where students get stuck. It's when the students get stuck, it's like they're holding up a red flag and saying, hey, this is where the special thinking, the experts in your field do something and I don't know how to do it. And so instead of thinking them as, oh, the students, they don't know how to read in my field, I mean, these are complaints of, they don't know how to write in my field, you can see them as a gift the students are giving you every day because they're exactly telling you where the experts are doing something and the students don't know how to do it. So it's showing you exactly where to dig in and help the students learn. And some bottlenecks that we see, so I'm going to talk about reading first and then about writing. Students really struggle to read. aloof, people who live in the northern parts of North America, they have 200 words for snow because they experience many kinds of snow and they live with snow a lot. I think there should be 200 words for read because it's been my experience that people mean very many different things when they want students to read. And they don't tell students that. So students go from class to class and they just read the same way. They basically just want to repeat what happened. And that might not be what the professor or the expert wants them to do. So I'm going to show you a couple of places where it's different. So where a professor in a science class will say, my students can't read. Or where a professor in a literature class says, my students can't really read. Okay, so let's see how that looks different using our framework. Okay, so this is a professor from a science course. Now I have to put up a video. The sound is going to work on this. Okay. Do you want me to start over?
It's
pretty quiet.
Please.
Okay. So she's saying she asks her student to read a paper and they didn't really do what she wanted them to do. So this is a reading problem. So in my theory, the first thing is you find out where the students are stuck. So she's saying they can't read a geology paper. And so now we want to ask her, like, what does she do? Exactly what are they getting wrong? So this is what she's explaining for about 2 minutes.
Publication. And I asked them to, I gave them a written piece of paper and I had 4 questions on it. The first question was, what is the question the researchers are addressing in their paper? The second question was, what are the data the researchers are using? The third question was, what are the interpretations? And the fourth question was, are the authors adhering to their data when they make their conclusions? So when I corrected the papers, I found that most everybody in the class got the first question, what is the topic being addressed? What is the question, the hypothesis? Everybody got that. The second question surprised me. What are the data that the researchers were using? Hardly, I would say, 2/3 of the class put down the methods instead of the data. And several of them even put down interpretations instead of data. Some of them put down data and interpretations, but the data were very brief. For example, the authors looked at corals and they made this particular interpretation.
And I just want to say that this is so the place where they're getting stuck is it seems like right now that they don't know what data are.
That's correct. They don't know. And they don't recognize it in the paper, even though the paper has a clear data section, data and results.
So far you've told us that they don't know how to summarize either a homework assignment in a 2-sentence, it's a variation of the 1 minute, the 1-sentence cat, 2-sentence cat. They don't know how to summarize either a paper or a homework assignment in that format. And they don't know how to recognize other data.
Yes.
And ask a follow-up question, because you asked them 4 questions.
Yes.
And it seems to me that they also can't distinguish an interpretation from data. And I wanted to ask about that fourth question, how they do on it, whether the authors adhere to their data. I assume that's a problem if they don't understand data too.
Yes.
Okay, so they're actually sort of 3 separate issues relating to data.
Right. Yeah. Good breakdown.
Okay, so we're going to stop there and see if we can look into these problems a little bit more. So here we have it, that students have difficulty reading research articles. And this is a problem we find actually in a number of fields, that students don't know the difference between the evidence and the results. Or in a history class, the evidence and the argument. That it just either all seems like evidence or it all seems like argument, and they don't know how to tell the difference between that. And that's one thing our theory helps us understand, why students are having trouble reading. And it very much matters what field you're in to say what it means to be reading. So to find out even more about this, I recently interviewed a biology professor. This is because the next step is we're going to try to, she was still trying to describe what the students couldn't do. I asked a biology professor about his students, because he, again, I heard this scientist, he's complaining my students can't read, they can't even read a research article. So then we asked, what do you do? What does the expert do? That's step 2 of decoding the disciplines. And he said, well, when he reads a research article, the first thing is that he usually goes straight to the results. Straight to the data. Because he says he usually actually can look at the authors of the article and he knows them because they're in his subfield. He kind of already knows the question they're asking. So he just goes right to the data. And when he looks at the data is usually a graph, something like this. That's what, for him, reading means. And when he reads the graph, he said that I asked him, does he picture something when he looks at it? Because it looks like it's a lot of numbers, so that makes some students, like, their eyes just glaze over. Oh no, I can't read numbers. That's some kind of a translation I can't do. And he said, actually, he starts picturing whatever kind of cell they were talking about, and it's that cell link, he starts picturing all the cells and their links. So he actually gets this picture of the real object in his head. From the graph, he goes to the real object in his head, and he's visualizing it, which is, it's going to be hard for the students to do that if somebody doesn't tell them that's what they're doing when they read a graph. So then I asked him a little, just to make it a little bit clearer, could we make a metaphor for that? What is that, to make a metaphor? And people suggested different kinds of metaphors, but I think the one we ended up liking was, it's kind of like for people who can read notes on a page and hear the music. You actually have to translate it almost to a different format. To see the notes on a page, to hear the music, to see the numbers of the cell length, and then picture the cells, and how many there are, and what they look like. So I thought that was very helpful to know that there's some kind of translation, a completely, very big transformation of the data into these numbers on this little chart into the real things, and how many there are of them. Okay, but that's what reading means for the scientists. So scientists are complaining all the time that students can't read, and this is what they mean. To be able to see what the data is actually saying with numbers, to visualize the real objects that way. So that's a reading bottleneck. Then I'm just going to switch to another bottleneck. So once you know what that is, then he's going to start, our method tells you how to show the students that tell the students that metaphor, and then start having students practice doing that, going to the results, picturing what it is, and making that transformation. But we don't have time to spend on that today. But I wanted to show you another bottleneck. This is a bottleneck in literature, just to show how different reading can be in 2 different fields. And I want you to look at handout 1. Actually, okay. Handout 1. This is a professor who's teaching. He's teaching a literature course in a Latino studies program here on campus. And he said that in a literature course, you bring other text or films or other things to the text you're reading, right? Bring another text to the text. So that's very different. That's very different from what the scientists mean when they say read. So I interviewed the professor, and he told me about 6 different steps he does when he's reading a text. And so first he's just reading the text. And actually, it's a Spanish language text that he had done this with recently, so he had to translate it. Then he's just reading it carefully. Number 2, read carefully, word by word, phrases and paragraphs. He reads it at least 3 times. For some books, he might read them 6 or 7 times. And then he starts looking for some recurring themes. What's it about? What's the context? And then number 3, he makes some ideas about how to connect to what he's working on. So he has to make this leap between the work he's doing. He's actually writing a book about bandits, so he's looking for the things he's interested in that they're doing. And he also looks for some, because he's a literature professor, he likes to look for some nice language that will draw him in. And I asked him, because experts can't really tell you how they do these things, I asked him in step 4, how do you pick the things to focus on? And he says if the author says something more than once, if it relates to my research, which is about print culture, about bandits. And he's just trying to notice, you know, why does this man care more about his horses and his guns than his wife? And he said somebody else might notice in this book that there's stuff about the weather and the landscape, but that wasn't of interest to him. So there's some things he's just skipping. He's not noticing everything. He has a particular lens he's bringing to it, and he knows what that is. So he has to decide what matters to him as he's interpreting it. So then he has this whole thing about how he annotates the text. He has his own system for annotating it, that's at step 5. And then I did finally ask him, like, how did he even end up choosing this text? So I just wanted to ask him, so when we're interviewing people about what the expert does, to me, it's a little bit like a Russian nested doll. An expert does a lot of things all at once, you know, and they can't really tell you what they're doing. And it's like, they do this, and they do this, you know, first he just reads it so he can interpret it, and then he wants to see exactly, sentence by sentence, are there some phrases that are jumping out of him? Are there things that relate to the things he's interested in? Then he starts marking it up. And so there's a lot of things going on there that he needs to know if he wants his students to learn how to do that when he's reading. Okay? So that is just 2 examples of using the bottleneck recoding disciplines framework to work on reading. So what we do is, right, we find the bottlenecks, which is the marker of critical thinking, and find out what the expert does. And then we want to, I want to go on to, I have something here about how you do the interview, but I want to show you how to do this with writing. Where's my writing slide? No, where's my writing slide? Here it is. This is the slide I want. Okay. So writing. Writing is like reading. Again, we need like 200 words to describe different kinds of writing. And writing has many different genres, and you have to show the students, they'll just write the same way for everyone. They just always want to tell what happened. So history, they make writing means make an argument backed by evidence. Geology writing means ask the question, collect data, analyze the evidence, and draw conclusions. Journalism, they're almost always writing information, but it has to have a narrative. They're telling a story always in journalism. Education, we often are developing models about how students learn, or how people, you might be working on how people learn language. You have a model for it or a theory about it, and then you try it out on real people. That's what we're writing about in education. What are our models for how people learn? Thank you. And in accounting, people might analyze financial documents and then write up a summary and a recommendation. So those are all really different kinds of actions that people do when they're teaching writing. And so how do we tell students exactly how to do that? I thought I would let you look at, I thought I would have you look at this example where we broke out the skills. So handout 3 is a paper that students are going to have to write in a 300 level history course at IU. And so they're going to write a paper, but the professor has broken out all the tasks the students have to do on a handout 2 down to the bottom. She breaks out everything, all the sub-skills that she wants them to do. I want you to turn and talk to the person next to you. Just read it for a minute and see what do you think the students would find especially hard to do. Okay? Of the things in that box, what do you think students would find especially hard to do? Okay? Read in this box. If the students are going to write a history paper, what do you think they will find hardest to do? There's not a right answer. Okay, I'm going to give you 1 minute to talk to each other. 1 minute. What do you think the students will find hardest to do? Okay, that was 1 minute. 1 minute's fast, isn't it? Does somebody want to tell me what they thought was hardest for students to do? Yes, thank you.
Synthesizing the material.
Yes. Well, at the end they have to synthesize it. I don't even think she has them synthesizing it there. She does have directions at the end where she says on the next page how to synthesize it. And she gives very clear directions for doing that. Do you see how she has really broken out all the parts for writing a paper? She's really tried to help them build up those skills, which is what we call scaffolding. So she's really scaffolding for writing and history. So that's why I wanted you to have this paper. I thought for the last word, I would let a student talk. I would let a student tell you how she... Yeah, this is a student who was taking a 9-day course. Do you know students at IU take the intensive freshman seminar? It's a 9-day course before the freshman year. And in that, they go to class all day for 9 days. And this is a student who says what she learned about writing in history course where we were using Decoding the Disciplines.
So zeroing back in on the level of course and education, if you were asked to write a paper in the future, what was helpful in this class, or something you learned in this class that would be helpful in doing it?
The first would probably be a thesis, because Professor Grace is really big on like writing a good thesis, and we did it every day of class. Every day we had to write a thesis. And like, I've been already writing papers for classes, and it's been so much help figuring out how to tie things in to like specific points, but also stating what you're going to talk about. And so that was really beneficial. And then also like how to organize your paper so everything ties in, not like, let's talk about this point, this point, this point, and nothing connects, but it connects to you, but not to the reader. So how to express what you're thinking and your thoughts processes to the reader and making it all connect was really helpful learning.
Okay, let's stop right there.
So I'm going to give you...
Let's stop right there. Okay, so I am done with my part of the presentation, and I wondered if you would please just take out a little scrap of paper and answer these questions for me. It's just one question. Describe Decoding the Disciplines to a friend as you understand it. Okay, you could just put it on the corner of a little sheet of paper. Okay, you know this is a classroom assessment technique. It's a quick check. You could use a corner at the end of the program and tear it off and give you a little corner of a sheet. Okay. We'll collect them. I will have questions. Okay, just pass them down to the end, and while you're passing them down, I'm ready for any questions, right? This is the question and answer period? Thank you. Anybody have any questions for me? Yes, no?
I was wondering, for example, if, like, about the definition of expert and novice, or, because all these were undergraduate students, right? And then with the graduate students, we have had some training in reading these research articles to their inquiry courses because they're expert
Well,
readers.
I think graduate students, it just, sometimes we work with graduate students. I know somebody's working on language education, on teaching pre-readers, the pre-reading skills. And in that case, they might be teaching the teachers how to do that. So the expert is the person who's teaching students the pre-reading skills. So you just have to think about who your audience is and who's the person who knows a lot. This stuff will help. We're finding it helps at many levels. We have good data on that.
So it is a matter of learner training in a way because
Yes.
they're made aware of what.
Right. It's where the learner's getting stuck. You take the notes from where the learner gets stuck. Martha?
I assume your experts were the professors, right? Or at least those were the ones you showed, and
Often it's the professor, but sometimes we're doing this out in the world with people who are, I mean, I saw in the restroom, there's a speaker, door of the restroom, there's a speaker coming from the New York Times, the guy from the New York Times who makes all the graphs for the New York Times, and we got to decode him, right? So we can show other people. There's actually this company trying to make a new company it's going to be online learning, and it's going to use decoding the disciplines at the heart, so.
And so I'm wondering if the professor lays out very clearly, for example, the one who's doing the Spanish text, whether he lays, or she, I don't know, lays this out for you, for his students in a way that they also can follow. Because as you interviewed him here, his steps seem to be that, you know, he has his own, but does he share
Well, I
that
told
with
it,
the
well,
students?
that's the next step for him to do that.
Because I usually find that experts don't, they feel it's their own idiosyncratic way of doing things, and therefore they're not going to say to students, do it this way. They may follow some other kind of a model that they've read about or something like that, or simply assume that students, by your senior year, you ought to be able to, you know, and then just leave it up to the students.
Well, that's why our model then goes on to show people how to model it. Once from the interview, you'll find out what is the kind of thinking they do. So, you know, they do these 6 steps or something like that. And then you model it. They have to model it for the students. They can't just lay it out there. They have to model it, which often involves using metaphors. They have to give the students practice, and the practice can't just be once. It has to be a lot of times. Then they have to work on some motivational aspects because emotions are really involved in teaching and learning. Then assess it to see if they get it. And most of the time when you assess, you don't find out. Like people assume, oh, my students got that. I'm assessing today. You find out that some of them got it. They got part of the way. They didn't get it all the way. I need to work on something more. And then our final step is to share, because then more people will understand what in all the different fields need to do this kind of work, because this is all happening in the different fields. So thanks, yeah. It's tacit, this knowledge is tacit to them, and it still has to be step-by-step made explicit.
So they bottleneck themselves in a sense in their teaching.
Yes, really true. Do you have a question?
Yes. Actually, I'm experiencing the bottleneck knowledge right now. Understanding things. I mean, you as an expert, you know all the framework, how to uncover or to discover the, the gap between novice and expert.
Yes.
And in different disciplines, there are many different ways to do that, right?
Yes.
So, in this case, what I got confused here. So in decoding the discipline cycle, is there any other way actually to understand the gap between the novice?
Do you see
and
that? You
experts?
saw me do an interview with the professor.
Yeah, interview.
And you saw me also interview a student. But we can also do, there's actually a way of building a rubric where you ask the professor, you can do it in groups, ask professors what their students do wrong on a particular assignment. And then once they list what the students get wrong, what the professor would have done right, and you start making a rubric that it'll actually decode the professor's kind of thinking for a particular assignment. Or you could work with metaphors. So we could say, what's a metaphor for reading in the sciences, where you have to like make that translation from the graph, and we said it's like reading the notes on a page. Now we could say for the literature professor, What's a metaphor for the thing you do when you're reading, which is, I don't know, inserting other texts and other frameworks into what you're reading? I don't know what that is, I haven't made that metaphor. And so there's other ways to do it. There's definitely other ways to do it. Just interview is one.
Okay, so it's always between expert and novice, then you have to interview.
So I act as the novice, so I have, it helps me not to know the person, not to know what the expert, if the expert, if I have that expertise, I can't really interview them. Usually we have 2 people interviewing. It'll be somebody maybe from within the discipline, and then for sure you need somebody from outside the discipline. You need that novice to, otherwise all the experts just agree with each other. Oh, that's clear, that makes perfect sense. We understand what you're talking about. Is there another question?
Yeah, so I was a middle school teacher, and I'm wondering if you've ever talked to K-12 teachers about this process, because to me it seems like a lot of what I did in the middle school classroom, which was, break things down for students, and I just like, is there some disconnection between like teaching at the university level and like the K-12?
There is.
There's
a big disconnection.
Of course.
I worked last summer with some high school history and social studies teachers, and they just wanted me to give them a lesson, right? But in a college class, the professor often gives students some material and wants them to work with it, wants students to find the evidence and come up with their own argument. And high school teachers often want a lesson that gets students to come to a particular argument, and it's all laid out. So it's much more teaching the how of the thinking of the discipline rather than the what. Students come to college and they're really used to being told the content. And it's very problematic when they get to the college level. So when I was trying, these high school teachers were going to be getting their value courses that get credit in the high school. It was very hard to get the teachers to try to think about where their students got stuck and what could they do to teach more like college teachers. Because it's very different. College teachers want students to, to do things like switch perspectives. That'll be the main thing a college history teacher might want students to do. And high school teachers are like, what's the lesson going to be? So I think, but that's exactly the reaction that we got from the high school teachers. This is what we're already doing. But the college teachers, when they got the students that had already had those courses, they're like, the students aren't prepared. They're not doing the same thing we're doing.
Yeah, and if I just may, the way I even got into my own research was asking the professor, well, where did you learn how to teach? Because the professor was so bad. And so many times, what you find out is professors have no background in any kind of pedagogy. It's just that they got good at what they did, they wrote a dissertation, and then they're there in front of the class and just going at it. So I'm assuming some of these folks may be from that paradigm rather than from the teaching background.
But the people with the teaching background, when they want everything wrapped up really tight, and it's not so much like that when you're teaching in college. Everything isn't that tight. It's, starting from where the students are and moving them along. And doing it with any content that's there. But the content doesn't really matter. That's the kind of thing you want to do. I know that my time's up, the next person has to go. Let me get my junk out of the way.